Also, I have started the recording this session. This session is only going to be recorded for internal purposes only, so just keep that in mind. Also, I want to briefly mention to make sure that you are muting your mic throughout the training, and also making sure that you turn off your camera. This will help us minimize distractions and also help some of us folks with bandwidth issues. To minimize disruptions during this course, please use the hand sign reaction for questions. That reaction sign should be on your Teams. And then also, due to the size of this class, please hold all content related questions until the knowledge checks. You'll learn more about what a knowledge check is in the next couple slides ahead. Also, throughout this training, we will have breakout sessions. Breakout sessions are a way for individuals to communicate with each other on Teams in a smaller setting. So just keep that in mind. I'll explain more in the slides ahead, but we will have breakout sessions for this training as well. So before we get started with the training, our executive director had a message for the GA training to kick us off.
Hello, I'm Denny Spinner, Executive Director of the Office of Community and Rural Affairs. Welcome to the 2022 Grant Administrators Training Program. We want you all to know how much we appreciate you being part of this program and the training today. For years, OKRA has helped provide the necessary services, infrastructure, and other programs to help our rural communities thrive. After serving as OKRA's Executive Director for over a year now, I continue to be just as excited about the role that OKRA plays in our rural Indiana communities as the day I started. I truly believe we are in a time when our agency can be transformational in our state. What OKRA is doing now and what you are doing as our partner is very important as we move forward. Thank you again for joining us today. I look forward to the great work we will do together to make Hoosier communities an even better place to live.
And so that was a message from our executive director, Denny Spinner. So now the CDBG director, Chris Hudgens, is going to speak more about the purposes of this class and start the training.
Thank you, Bolonley. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes after that very warm welcome from Denny, just kind of talking a little bit more what our purpose is here today. Of course, we understand that securing diverse and sustainable funding is a necessity for virtually every community, right? Local leaders rely on programs like CDBG to help address needs, to deliver services, to demonstrate the results of their work so that they can achieve their local priorities more effectively. But to secure the funding needed to implement any project, communities need to make sure that they have a person on their team with the knowledge and skills to lead that process. Someone who understands and is able to execute the various stages of the CDBG grant lifecycle from application through administration. GAs help communities and public agencies like OKRA to work together so that we can ensure that the process of implementing what can be complex federally funded grants like CDBG at a high level. And that is really the primary responsibility of a grant administrator, right? Overseeing a federally funded CDBG grant, which we understand takes an enormous amount of effort we have assembled a team of individual experts from grant services and Okra here today to support you in your efforts to learn more about how to do that. Writing the application, of course, is just the first step. It's important to remember that effective administration and compliance. So it really is a team effort to ensure that CDBG funds are spent wisely, efficiently, and with the greatest impact. But in a nutshell, that's what grant administrators do, and that's why we're here today. You grease the wheels so that the community doesn't run afoul of the regulations that are required as part of a CDBG grant. And so our goal for today is to provide you with some foundational understanding of what those requirements look like, so that you can begin to answer basic questions about the CDBG program and begin along the path of becoming a certified grant administrator, if that is in fact what you are hoping to achieve through your attendance today. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are some learning objectives for this particular course so that you understand exactly what you should be able to do at the end of this course. Of course, the dynamics of CDBG are not necessarily fluid, but they're very nuanced. And so we're going to unpack some of those nuances today and help you to begin learning how to list, define, differentiate between some of the main aspects, some of the main requirements related to the funding source. So those are going to be things like national objective, eligible and ineligible activities. At the end of this course, you should be able to distinguish and to differentiate between those things and to better understand, relate to one another in terms of whether or not your project is what we would consider to be fundable under CDBG requirements. We're going to have some practice where you're going to be able to work alongside your fellow participants to evaluate projects to determine if they could be funded by CDBG. We're going to walk through the project development and application processes at a very high level, with a focus on identifying who those key stakeholders are within the process and who should be at the table when you're starting a conversation about a potential CDBG funded project. We're going to identify some specific knowledge areas for you to pay attention to. These are these kind of need to know pieces of CDBG that you as a grant administrator need to have a good understanding of. And then, of course, we're going to walk through the different phases of the grant, kind of map out the differences between and we want to understand and can differentiate between the differences. And then, of course, we're going to do some key terms, kind of get you more familiar with the language of CDBG so that you are able to communicate those requirements at a higher level. So next slide. Okay, but first, we're going to take a few moments to introduce ourselves and to talk a little bit more about what we do and what our role is as a state, as the state agency that oversees CDBG. Next slide. Okay, so for this module, we're going to do introductions. We're going to do some key terms and definitions, begin talking about some of the items that I already mentioned. Before I move on to the next slide, I do want to spend a few minutes just kind of talking a little bit more about the agency for those of you who may not necessarily be familiar with OCRA. OCRA was established as a separate state agency by the state legislature in 2005. The executive director, who you met earlier, is appointed by the lieutenant governor, who also serves as the secretary of rural development. But in a nutshell, OCRA works with local, state, and national partners to provide resources and technical assistance to aid communities in shaping and achieving their vision for community and economic development. CDBG is just one of those resources, but it is the privilege of our agency to award CDBG grants to fund things like public gathering spaces, to fix water sewer infrastructure, to do historic preservation work, restoring historic structures, building community facilities, and helping to revitalize commercial districts. But these funds help communities to improve their quality of life and to ensure the health and safety of their citizens. We know that roughly 40% of the state's population lives across our 76 rural counties. These rural counties possess extraordinary natural beauty, a lot of wonderful small towns and their own unique history and culture and identity, natural resources that need to be preserved, enhanced, and developed. And while there are 72 rural counties, OCRA's goal is to be impactful across all 92 counties through its various programs, including CDBG. But our goal for today is really to give you that what and the why of CDBG, and that begins with getting to know us. So Balanle, can you advance us to the next slide, please? I'm going to start with the CDBG team. You can see us there, happy and smiling. I'll start with Matt Wakefield. Matt Wakefield has been with OCRA since September of 2018. That's about 3.5 years. He has a Master of Arts in Geography, Regional Planning, along with a post-baccalaureate certificate in Community Development. As part of the CDBG team, Matt Wakefield serves as our agency's primary Salesforce administrator. As many of you know, we've moved to an electronic grants management system. Matt Wakefield has graciously and very effectively led that transition and continues to serve the agency in his capacity as an administrator to identify continuous improvements, to process the feedback that we receive from all of you as you engage with the system, so that we can continue to improve our efficiency and the accessibility of the information related to our CDBG grants and other programming as well. Matt also takes the lead on many of our pilot programs, programs like Beat the Heat, our owner-occupied rehabilitation program, our recovery housing program. Matt is instrumental in identifying unique policies and procedures that need to be developed so that we can test out new opportunities for communities as they come our way, and specific to CDBG funding. Balanle is also a part of our team. She's been with us since October 2020. Which is about 1.5 years. She has a Master's of Science in Strategic Leadership and Design from the University of Indianapolis, and is a certified project manager. She, of course, heads up our GA training and continuing education efforts. So most of you have been communicating with her during the weeks leading up to this course, getting questions answered about the requirements, getting questions answered about how to register effectively and what you can expect to learn as a participant in this course. Balanle also takes the lead on our planning grant program and is your first stop for any pre-approvals needed related to the program. So if you're a community and you're going to request permission to conduct an income survey, or you're coming in with an application and you want to apply to receive bonus points for being part of for the project being part of a regional planning effort, Balanle is who you would reach out to as your first point of contact to start that conversation. So we're very happy to have them both here today. You're going to be hearing more from both of them as we continue. And I think I would be remiss if I did not mention that we also have our community liaison team here with us today. You're going to learn a little bit more about who they are later on in the presentation. But we're very, very happy to have them here on the call with us, and we look forward to sharing more with you about how they can serve as a resource for you and where some of those intersection points are as you are really digging in to the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of the program, and you're looking for where you can best use your CL as a resource. We're going to talk more about that, and we're looking forward to having them be part of that. So moving on to the next slide. Oh, knowledge check. Balanle, all you.
Thank you for the introductions, Christmas. Appreciate you. So a knowledge check is a quick way to assess your knowledge throughout the training and course. This one in particular is going to test your knowledge for the most basic level terms for the CDBG 101 course. This will help you get used to how knowledge checks work. So now I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in the chat. And you all should have access to it. You don't have to fill your email out or anything like that in there. Just take a minute or two to look at those, and then we'll go over your answers, and then we'll start the training. If you have any questions on this knowledge check, please feel free to drop those as in the chat or raise your hand and I will answer them. Hello. Yes, the link is in the chat. I just dropped it up there. Let me go ahead and copy and paste it again so you can see it. I'm seeing 2 questions so far, one from Gavin. Gavin, you can unmute yourself. What was the question? Okay. So I'm not hearing anything from Gavin. Monty, I'm sorry. What was your question?
I can't seem to find the link.
The link is in the chat. So if you go to your chat function in Teams, you'll be able to see it.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. Alrighty. I have a question from Amber. Yes?
Yes, we are having a hard time finding our chat option over here at our office, so I'm not sure if you can maybe help show us where that's at. Because we have like no chat option.
There should be, so if you're able to react, you should be able to see the chat function as well. It should be on your right-hand side or left-hand side, depending on what your view looks like. I'm unable to map you all the way just because sometimes it's a little bit different from the state computers versus the public-facing teams.
Okay, yeah, myself and the other person in my office, we still don't have it anywhere, so I'm not sure.
Do you know what icon you're looking for the chat?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hovering over every icon and none of them say chat.
It might say conversation.
Yeah, I don't have any of those either. I even clicked on more options and there's no conversation as well.
If you're having issues, please contact Janet Hertier. She'll be able to assist you more on this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and it looks like around 56 of you have have answered this poll, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. So I have now shared my screen. So the first question is, what does CDBG stand for? So yes, looks like the majority of you answered yes. All of you answered correctly. That would be the Community Development Block Grant. So that is correct. The second question is, what are grants? A grant is a way the government funds your ideas and projects to provide public services and stimulate the economy. So that was the correct answer. There are contracts involved, but that is not the correct definition of a grant. We'll talk more about that in the slides ahead. So what does OKRA stands for? Yes, okay, 100% of you all have that right. So that's the Office of Community and Rural Affairs. All the other answers are made up, but. And then, okay, so we'll get into more of this in the next few slides as well. So the city of Beech Grove is an entitlement community. The majority of you have that right, so it actually is false. We'll get into the differences between an entitlement and non-entitlements in the slides ahead, but that is a key term because OKRA CDBG primarily assists non-entitlements. So then question number 5, true or false, communities must have a grant administrator in order to apply for CDBG funds. We recently just mentioned that. So yes, if you answer true for, you cannot apply for CDBG funds at OKRA without a certified grant administrator. So with that said, we'll go ahead and go into the content of the course. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then eventually share the presentation. And hopefully you are all able to see my screen now again. So we'll go ahead and get started. So again, the first few slides that I'm going to discuss are just general terms so that we can all understand these general terms before we get into the specifics of CDBG and what it is. So what are grants? A grant is a way the government funds your ideas and projects to provide public services and stimulate the economy. This definition is provided by grants.gov. If you are interested in learning more about grants in general, that is a great resource for you to use. As Christmas mentioned, OKRA interprets grants as a way for communities to improve quality of life and health and safety. So now that we've talked about the general term of what a grant is, now we're going to get into more specifics. So a program is defined as a group of related projects managed in a coordinated way. So we have the CDBG program. So that the CDBG program involves different projects. A project is a temporary endeavor with a finite end to create a unique product, service, or result. So for that, we fund projects. So CDBG is a federal grant program that funds eligible projects that meet the national objective. And those key definitions are from PMI, another resource for general terms related to project management. And now Christmas is going to go ahead and discuss the remainder of these slides.
So I get to dig into what CDBG is all about. So as we've mentioned, CDBG stands for Community Development Block Grant. As many of you know, the CDBG program is funded through HUD. It is a federally funded program geared toward the improvement of quality of life for people of low to moderate income and to help address urgent health and safety needs of low income communities. So the CDBG program has been continuously administered by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development since 1970, making it one of HUD's longest running community improvement and housing affordability programs. Each year, HUD allocates a portion of its budget to fund the CDBG program. It uses a formula to determine how those funds are allocated, beginning with so-called entitlement grantees, which is namely just every metropolitan area with at least 50,000 people, larger cities and counties with a population of more than 200,000. We're going to talk about the differences between entitlements and non-entitlements a little bit later. But in 2021, HUD allocated nearly $3.5 billion for the CDBG program. And according to HUD statistics since 1974, it has issued CDBG grants totaling more than $160 billion. Now, entitlements receive 70% of that, but HUD distributes the remaining 30% of CDBG funds to states. For the state of Indiana, OCRA is the agency that is tasked with overseeing the distribution of those funds to what we call non-entitlements. So non-entitlement communities are those smaller rural communities and localities within the state that submit applications and compete for CDBG funding through their collaboration with OCRA. The primary objective of CDBG is to benefit principally the primary beneficiaries of the program are those folks that are considered to be low to moderate income. So as I mentioned, there are two types of communities within the state of Indiana, entitlements versus non-entitlements. Entitlements are those larger communities of more than 50,000, for more than 200,000. They receive money directly from HUD. So they receive their annual allocation every year directly from HUD. They have a grant agreement with that federal agency. They have their own action planning process through which they allocate the funds that they receive, identify projects and priorities. OCRA does not work directly with entitlements, with a few exceptions when we do have maybe special allocations like CARES Act funds or the special allocation we received for the Recovery Housing Program. But in general, the focus of the state CDBG funding are those non-entitlement communities. So those are smaller communities with less than 50,000 residents who receive money from OCRA through a competitive granting process. For communities that are considered to be unincorporated, those areas must apply through the county in which they are located. Can you move to the next slide for us, please, Belanley? So we've provided you with the list of which communities within the state of Indiana are considered to be entitlement communities. There are some nuances even within the entitlements that you as a certified grant administrator or as a local stakeholder should have some awareness of. You can see Hamilton County and the city of Indianapolis highlighted here, for example, because there are select areas within those entitlements that are non-entitlements. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. So Indianapolis virtually makes up the entire portion of Marion County, known as Marion County Indianapolis Unigov. So there are actually a few communities within Marion County, such as Speedway, Lawrence, Beech Grove, Southport, that are not part of Unigov and therefore would be eligible for CDBG assistance through OCRA. Lake County, not Lake County, forgive me, but just Hamilton County. Just Hamilton County contains communities that have opted out of the entitlement and would also be considered eligible for state CDBG funds. Those would be Atlanta, Sheridan, and Arcadia, for those of you that are interested in knowing which ones have opted out. But the process of becoming of a non-entitlement, becoming an entitlement is very, very rare. Typically, they need to meet that population requirement, and then they would need to formally request that through HUD. The most recent community to have done that within the state of Indiana, I believe, is Greenwood. In case you are curious about that, they are the newest addition to our list of entitlements. You can also find that list on HUD.gov. I would encourage you to check it out anytime a community reaches out to you. If you are not sure whether they would be considered an entitlement or a non-entitlement, you can check with your community liaison, or you can check the HUD website and find out for sure. Because there are some kind of unique even nuances within the nuances, right? Because even within Marion County, we have some communities, for example, Marion County was just the first one that came to my mind, where you have communities that actually span 2 counties. So we have a community on the east side of Marion County that's half in Hancock County and would be considered, that section of town would be considered non-entitlement. And then the other side of town that is within Marion County would be considered part of the entitlement. So anytime you have questions about any of that, that's a good place to reach out to your CL so that they can help answer any questions related to the general eligibility of a community. Now, how does OKRA determine, state of Indiana determine activities and funding distributions for its CDBG allocation? That's called the consolidated plan. So basically on an annual basis, OKRA has to submit an annual action plan for the upcoming fiscal year that also serves as an applications for the funding that we receive from HUD. That is typically due mid-May. The plan includes the area's expected funding resources and stated community development goals. It provides information about planned projects, including their geographic distribution and the activity categories and development objectives that they fall under. The creation of that action plan includes a lot of community outreach. It is very much a community-driven planning process. OKRA hosts public meetings along with, and then every 5 years, that annual action plan is also submitted alongside a consolidated plan that outlines the state's long-term community development needs, priorities, and strategic plan for the funds. So we've got that consolidated plan, right, which is the 3 to 5 year plan that outlines the long-term community development needs and priorities for the state CDBG allocation. Within that consolidated plan is that 1 year action plan that is updated annually through a public vetting process to identify and to define exactly how the state is going to spend its allocation, which is commonly referred to as the method of distribution. So for more information on all of this, you can check out our consolidated and action plan page on the website. In addition, OKRA has reporting requirements. So a consolidated annual performance evaluation report, or a CAPER, that covers the previous fiscal year's activities is submitted to HUD at the end of September to ensure that we're meeting our objectives. It basically just includes a description of the progress made in accomplishing those objectives for the state's CDBG program and a summary of how those funds were used in the preceding fiscal year. But really, we just have to answer questions like, how many beneficiaries did we help, income level for those persons? How many projects did we have that focused on underserved populations based on race, ethnicity, disability, things of that nature? So with that, I am going to hand it off to Matt Wakefield, and he's going to kind of dig into the next piece related to eligibility. So let's say you've got a community, it's incorporated, it's non-entitlement, and on its face eligible for CDBG funding through the state. The next step in the process is to determine if the potential project they have meets a national objective, and Matt Wakefield's going to take you through what that means.
Thanks, Christmas. Yeah, now we're really jumping into the nuts and bolts of CDBG. The two things that you're really going to learn today for each project is that you're going to have to meet 2 criteria. You're going to need to hit the national objective, and you're going to have an eligible activity. So we're going to kind of go over the logic puzzle that is meeting both of those. And I'm going to start just with the introduction to the national objective. So the national objective for CDBG is one of these 3 criteria. Those 3 objectives need to benefit low to moderate income persons, as defined by HUD and the census, preventing or eliminating slums and blight, or meeting an urgent need. And as our task, OKRA, as the state agency responsible, at least 70% of our expenditures each year need to go to meeting the first national objective, which is low to moderate income persons. So the primary responsibility of HUD and ourselves for these funds is to meet that national objective of benefiting low to moderate income residents and people in the state of Indiana. And so this is just a quick tree that you can kind of see how the national objectives are broken down and met and out. I will note that if you do have some experience with CDBG prior to this, you'll notice that there are a couple missing. And that's just because we don't touch upon them very often or ever at Okra. So there is other national objectives for low to moderate income, housing, jobs that we typically do not deal with. So for the purpose of this course, these are the ones we want you to focus on and understand the ins and outs of, knowing that there are other ways to meet the national objective, but will not be pertinent to your role as a grant administrator for Okra. But if you're working with our partner agency, IHCDA, you may run into others. Okay. And so each one of these national objectives are somewhat broken down as they sound. So LMI is benefiting those low to moderate income persons. The project must be at least 51% benefiting the service area, which we'll talk about, must be at least 51%. This to slum and blight must aid in the prevention or elimination of slums or blight. And that has a pretty rigorous criteria that we will touch upon today, but we'll go into much more detail in later courses. And then finally, urgent need, which is providing funding for projects that have a particular urgency because of existing conditions that pose a serious or immediate threat to the health and welfare of the community. And that is something that um, is a very defined urgent need from HUD. So what might feel like an urgent need for your community might not, most likely does not meet the criteria in HUD's mind of what an urgent need project is. All right, next bundling. So the first national objective, LMI benefit, is, as we saw, broken down kind of into two. The most common one that you're going to see that is typically is the LMI area benefit. And so the area benefit really shows that the service area, so the people inside, usually the town itself or a neighborhood within the town, essentially that 51% of those residents need to be or meet the low to moderate income definition as defined by HUD. And so what that means is that a family or household needs to have an annual income less than 80% of the area median income. And that is usually defined in the census. HUD will release those each year. And it goes by county or it goes by the metro area, those percentiles. And so you'll need to check against those to see if your community does in fact qualify. HUD has released a new map. So we can use the mapping element, which we'll go into detail later. And then finally, and then as detailed, there is the census data that shows, so there are ways to show LMI area using that mapping tool as described. It's also possible to survey your service area, which means you would need, or to do a census of your service area, which means you would need to interview each individual person or household. And then finally, there is income surveys. So if there is a reason in which you believe that the data shows that your community or service area is in fact less than 51%, but there is a change in the inside that service area or isn't correctly represented, it is possible to do an income survey of the community itself. And there is a detailed process that we will go into later on how to conduct and determine if the community is eligible to do an income survey. or if it is logical to do an income survey. Income surveys are different than conducting a census. An income survey will only take a portion of the community, so you will survey many less households than if you were to do a true census, in which you would have to survey every household. Conley? And then the other way to qualify is through limited clientele for the low to moderate income. And this essentially is the second way to qualify. And that in this way, if you're looking at it, if you're looking at your community, you're not really looking at a geographic area in this sense. You're really looking more at the people who are going to be served. So if there is a service that would only be available to community members who are low to moderate income, it's possible to do that project under limited clientele, in which 51% of those beneficiaries must meet those income criteria. This is a little more strict or difficult to meet because you will need to take income documentation of each person served. So instead of qualifying beforehand, you will need to take that income documentation. So we see this much less often, but is a possibility for communities looking to apply for a specific service. Huntley? And then related to and part of limited clientele are what are considered presumed classes. And so these are activities that provide services or a facility for services directly to persons that HUD and Congress have deemed to be presumed more than likely above 51% low to moderate income. So in the next slide, we'll go over what those presumed classes are. But if you are doing a project that is going to benefit a presumed class, it would be presumed to be 51% low to moderate income, and you would not need to take income documentation, and you would not need to meet the area benefit because you're only serving in this group of people who are presumed to already be low to moderate income. And so next slide, Blondley. So these classes are, and these are as defined by Congress. So some of these terms are severely outdated, but have not been updated since the 70s when the Housing and Urban Development was created. But these presumed classes for our regulatory purposes are considered abused children, battered spouses, senior citizens, age 62 and above, illiterate adults, severely disabled adults, homelessness, persons with HIV or AIDS, and migrant farm workers. And so draft definitions of those are available from HUD if you do have questions about that. And if you do believe you have a project that's going to meet a presumed class, you would certainly work with us and a CL to determine eligibility for that project. Something that's important to note about presumed classes and using the LMI presumed class national objective is that you cannot mix and match presumed class projects with other projects. So if your project is going to only benefit persons with HIV or benefit persons with HIV AIDS, your project can only benefit those persons. The only eligible portion of the project would be the part of the project that benefits persons with HIV AIDS. It cannot benefit seniors as well or benefit the general population. So if you're using a presumed class, you can only use one of these criteria. So then the second national objective, sort of national objective, I guess itself, is slum and blight. And next one, blonde light. And so for the prevention and elimination of slum and blight, HUD considers structures to be blighted when they exhibit objectively determinable signs of deterioration sufficient to constitute a threat to human health, safety, and public welfare. So that's a really key term. So your project, and this is something to always keep in the back of your mind, you need to meet a national objective and have an eligible activity in order to receive CDBG funds. But just because your project meets those funds or meets those criteria does not mean that it will be potentially fundable. So just because you have a blighted structure in your community that technically meets the criteria, if you cannot show that it's a threat to human health and safety or public welfare, it likely will not be funded. Next slide. And then there are two ways to meet the slum and blight criteria for the national objective. There is the area basis, which means essentially you are looking at a neighborhood that has a defined boundaries, and then the majority of the buildings or a significant portion of the buildings within this area are considered meet the criteria for slum and blight, or the spot basis, which is parcel by parcel. And this just depends on how you're constructing the project. If you're planning on receiving funds for multiple buildings or multiple areas, or if you are meeting the objective to do another eligible activity that would prevent slum and blight in that area. So for a Main Street revitalization, slum and blight could be a potential way to meet that program's eligible criteria. So then you would need to show an area basis that this is to prevent or eliminate slum and blight. So we'll get more into eligible activities later on, but do know that they're within that, depending on how you're constructing your project, it's important to understand the difference between an area basis or a spot basis, because that could potentially limit what you want to do or how you could be eligible for the project. And then finally, urgent need. And so, next slide, Blondie. Oh, there we go. So for urgent need, you must meet all of these criteria. And I will say this off the bat, we rarely ever see an eligible urgent need project. We've had one in the last 7 years, I believe, that met all these criteria. And so you need to have existing conditions that pose a serious and immediate threat to the health and welfare of the community. So not something that the community's been dealing with. This is an immediate need that has to happen. They have to have happened within the last 18 months or become urgent within the last 18 months. And the biggest thing that prevents communities is that the community is unable to finance the activity on its own or is unable to obtain funding through other sources. So when we talk about CDBG, these are truly the funds of last resort, and an urgent need, that criteria is the absolute last resort. So when we're looking at urgent need, those funds, your city funds, your community funds need to be exhausted. Not we don't want to use them or they're earmarked for other things. If this is truly an urgent need in HUD's mind, then you need to have used those funds or be allocating those funds towards this project along with any CDBG dollars. So oftentimes when we have communities talking about doing an urgent need project, or they believe they're an urgent need, when we start talking about their finances and how much of their finances would also need to be put towards this project before CDBG urgent need funds would be eligible for them, usually that's when they look into other options aside from using urgent need. But it is an option for communities, but we very, very rarely see it. All right, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Blanle, who's going to lead us into activity 1.
Thanks, Matt. So now we're going to go ahead and segue into our first activity, as Matt mentioned. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to break into small groups. I will be doing this with Teams. Teams is it is a it's technology. So just if you are having any issues in the actual breakout rooms, please just drop a message in the chat. So the first thing you'll want to do is when you actually get into your breakout group, you're going to select the person to be the spokesperson for your group. So I noticed that some of you are having issues with being able to see the link or anything like that. So there will be one person that will fill it out on your group's behalf. You can create a group name. it will ask you to at least put your first and last name of the scribe so that when I call upon the scribe, it will make it a little bit easier for that activity. And then once you're also in breakout groups, you'll look out for an announcement in Teams on when to come back, and then we'll go ahead and return and discuss the activity. So right now I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in the chat so that you can all see it. I will also drop the link again in an announcement as well. But I would go ahead and save that link somewhere so that when we are going out to breakout rooms, it'll make things a little bit easier for you all. Any questions on that process? Okay, and I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm gonna go ahead and put you all into the breakout rooms. Oops.
Pam, I have you in here, correct?
So the activity should be in the announcement that you all received, and it's also in the chat. So take a few minutes, elect a scribe, and then and yeah, Pam, you'll have to use the chat to speak then.
Hi, everyone in the breakout room. I can go ahead and start filling out the form if we'd like.
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay. I can be the person to speak on the group's behalf. I'm Emma. Okay, so the first question is, says OCRA must ensure that at least blank % of expenditures for each funding year must be used for activities that qualify under LMI. Isn't that 70%? I believe.
So, can you share that form as you're filling it out by any chance? So we can see the questions as well?
Let's see, can I share? And then I come over here. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you so much. Okay. So,
All right.
yeah.
I think we have it now. Sure.
Okay. So yeah, I believe number 1 is the 70%. Please let me know if I'm wrong. So I'll move on to the second question if you guys want to read it.
Yeah. That's limited clientele, probably. Does everybody agree with that?
I'm not sure. I need to look back because it
is. Yes.
it is okay. Okay. Number 3.
That would be urgent need.
Yeah. Okay.
I agree.
That's area basis.
Yeah, I believe that area.
Okay. Is that it? Oh no, we have more. Not so fast. Okay.
That would be an LMI area benefit.
Correct.
Gotcha.
That would actually be LMI area benefit as well. The one, the town of Fountain City. It would just have to probably be determined by an income survey, but they don't ask that part.
Okay.
So why would it be the area one and not the limited one? I'm not questioning you. I'm trying to learn.
Oh, not a problem at all. The reason for that is because you would have a mixed number of residents that are benefiting this, and it wouldn't fit your limited clientele presumed classes.
Right. You're right. Okay, thank you.
I also wasn't sure, so I needed that explanation as well.
That would be the slum blight spot basis, I believe.
Correct. Yeah.
Because it's a specific property.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Next one.
I think this one would be LMI area benefit, because even though it's a defined area, it doesn't mention any kind of blight.
Correct.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I agree.
And it would once again need an income survey, unless the community already qualified.
Or the area already qualifies.
Gotcha.
So would you just do an income survey of that area, like those streets involved?
That's a great question. There are communities where the community itself does not meet the LMI, but you may have an isolated area within the community that does. And so you would probably do an income survey of that area to determine the eligibility. And if they meet the 51%, then you could go ahead and do the project just for that area. This would go a lot of times with counties. You remember we talked about unincorporated communities in counties. They would have to apply for funds through the county. This would be an example of that type of a circumstance.
Okay.
Would this be slum blight area basis?
You got it. Exactly right.
Mm.
Cool. Okay.
There's a lot of information packed in there.
Yeah.
It would be the LMI area benefit.
That is, yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
I think there's one more.
Yeah, there's last one. I think. Is it LMI limited clientele?
Yeah. Is it that one?
Yes.
Correct.
Cool. Okay. Is that it? That's
That's
it.
it. Then we can go back.
I was like, well, it shows we got 11/11, guys.
Nice.
There we go. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Jerry. I hope you get an 11 out of 11.
We would hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and end the breakout rooms at 10:10. Thank you so much for being good sports about that. We're still trying to work on how the breakout rooms and how to utilize this technology. So I really appreciate you all.
I don't think I know how to leave.
I think it kicks us out.
Yeah, once I close the room, we're technically in the room all together. Some people, sometimes we have like an all-encompassing room where, if all the breakout sessions don't get filed into one, they end up just going to the general room. So you won't go anywhere.
Okay.
Hang on out here for a sec.
for our limited clientele from Anne's team, and I am voting Slum Blight spot basis. So how do you want to? Emma Woods, are you the other person?
Hello, yes.
Cool.
Who? From our group? Yeah.
Yeah. It was with Roxanne a second ago. Oh wait, there's more people in here. How many people are in here?
Thank you. I'm closing the rooms right now, so you will be entered back into the main room. Thank you so much for everyone's patience. We are again testing out this technology for the breakout rooms. So if you are in this room, please make sure that you are muted again, and please make sure that your camera is off. This will save with bandwidth issues. Yes, thank you again. We really do appreciate all of your patience through this activity. So to go ahead and move forward with the activity, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can go ahead and keep it moving. So it looks like 12 of you were able, and it looks like the median score of this activity was 9. So good on you all. This was just to test your knowledge. I do have all the answers for the activity, so I will quickly go over that, and then we'll go ahead and dismiss you for a 5-minute break. So the first question is, was it fill in the blank? And it's Okra must ensure that at least blank % of its expenditures for each funding year must be used for activities that qualify under LMI. So that answer, if you answered 70, you would be correct. It's not 51. 51 is actually a different threshold for it's a different requirement. So we require the low to moderate low to LMI for an area basis to be 51%, but then on our end of the deal, Okra has to have at least 70% of his expenditures for each funding year towards low to moderate income individuals. So then it says the second one is blank is a second way to qualify specific activities under the LMI benefit national objective. Under this category, 51% of the beneficiaries of an activity must be LMI persons. It is not the LMI concentration of surface area that determines whether the activity will qualify or not, but the actual number of LMI persons who will benefit from the activity. So as Matt mentioned, it would be limited clientele. So we're looking for a limited clientele. It would not be a presumed class because it's not talking about a particular class. It is a limited clientele. So another fill in the blank provides funding for projects that have particular urgency because existing conditions pose a serious immediate threat to health and welfare of the community. That would be urgent need. So urgent need, again, want to talk about the fact that this is a rarely used national objective for CDBG. So then this other question is clearly eliminating signs of slum or blight in a defined area. So that was pretty much a given. It's area basis because it's in an area and not a particular section. So then we also tested some other knowledge areas as well. So this one was really trying to see by looking at project summaries, which is something that you'll have to do as a grant administrator, is look at different towns and be able to understand like which national objective they would use to qualify for an Okra project. So the first one would be LMI area benefit. So for any type of plans, most plans would have LMI area benefit for that. So the second one is the town of Fountain City is looking to make improvements to the town's water system. The improvements will benefit 672 residents. So if we're making This is, again, a very common project that you'll see in CDBG for improvement of water utilities and water infrastructure. So again, that's again a LMI area benefit, even though we didn't include necessarily the national objective percentage in these. We would be looking for the area benefit for that. And then we have Town of Silver Lake. So removing a school building in particular, that would be a spot basis. So again, I'm just going through the answers. So then the city of Sullivan wants to install a new storm sewers along the Price Street starting at State Street. So this again would be area benefit. This is another type of project that you'll see. Then we have the town of Pendleton facade projects. So that is slum blight area bases. As you see, there's multiple buildings, so downtown. Then the city of Greencastle wants to do water improvements. So again, another common type of project that we usually use, and that'll be area benefit. And then the last one is to expand a senior center. So that would be limited clientele. So thank you so much for participating in this activity. Hopefully that was helpful for you to just kind of sink your teeth into the types of activities you'll look into. Right now, we're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back here at 10:25. Okay?
Looks like 40. I don't think it's 40 though. This 40 number.
Okay, and we're back from our 5-minute break, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We do have a knowledge check, but for timing, we're going to go ahead and circle back to it. So now we're going to go for eligible activities. With Jerry White.
Everybody, my name is Jerry White, and I am the Northwest Community Liaison. And by virtue of the fact that I've been with the agency for quite a while, I'm also what's known as the Senior Community Liaison. It also means that I'm just very old. What we're talking about here is a follow-up to the conversation about national objective. Every national objective has a number of different eligible activities. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So once a project meets a national objective, we have to work with the communities to determine what is the eligible activity and whether or not the activity that they're wanting to do is eligible under that national objective. So it is Okra's responsibility to make sure that each project meets both a national objective and an eligible activity. Next slide, please. So what we have listed here are a number of the different eligible activities that we typically will see. These are not necessarily project specific. So we have to be able to identify which what the activity is and how the eligible, whether or not it's eligible under that particular national objective. So just going through some of these very quickly. You can utilize CDBG funds to acquire property. You can also use CDBG funds to sell or lease a CDBG eligible property that was already purchased or used or acquired through CDBG funds. You can clear or demolish a real property, a building or a structure. You can rehabilitate a publicly or privately owned commercial or industrial building. We typically don't get into that too much simply because we have to go through a job creation process associated with that. We can do projects that involve ADA code enforcement. We can also do projects that involve historic preservation. And it's important to understand that we're not just doing cosmetic changes. We are actually preserving the structure that is the part of the project. We can be involved in the renovation of closed buildings. In other words, instead of tearing a building down, we can help to renovate it so that it can be used for future purposes. The future purpose will have to be a CDBG eligible activity. We can work with privately owned utilities. In the state of Indiana, there are a number of utilities that are privately owned. This would be, for instance, with homeowners associations, those types of organizations. They sometimes have their own utilities. We can help to build public facilities. These would be nursing homes, libraries, or community centers, or other activities such as that. We can use CDBG funds for public services, although in the Okra world, we're very, very involved in bricks and mortar, not so much in operations. We can utilize CDBG funds for economic development or micro enterprise assistance. We've used for commercial rehabilitation of certain facilities. We can even do special economic development activities associated with different communities utilizing CDBG funds. Here. Then we can assist nonprofits. They would be subrecipients to our grants through a unit of local government in order to be able to do community revitalization, community economic development, as well as sometimes energy conservation projects. And this is just a very, very small list of the types of activities that we can do utilizing CDBG funds. Okra, because of the funding we receive and the consolidated plan process that we go through, we do just a limited number of these types of activities. So let's go on to look at the non-eligible activities under CDBG. So we cannot utilize CDBG funds for the general conduct of government. We will not build city halls. We will not build police stations. We will not build garages for the street department, those types of activities. There's an exception to that, and that is we will help to utilize, or we will use CDBG funds to help build fire stations and EMS stations. Those serve the general public in ways that will benefit low to moderate income persons. So in other words, if we're doing a fire station or an EMS station, that service area has to be 51% low to moderate income. That would be the national objective. We cannot utilize CDBG funds for general government expenses. We cannot use it to develop or do park programming or other types of assistance. It is just we have to be very, very restrictive in terms of how we use those funds for government purposes. We cannot use CDBG funds to finance political activities. We cannot use it to purchase equipment that is generally ineligible. There are some items of equipment that we just cannot fund. We cannot purchase personal property, including equipment, fixtures, motor vehicles, furnishings, or other personal property. So as an example, when we help to build a community center and they put a kitchenette in, we will not be helping to purchase refrigerators or stoves. That is going to be assumed to be responsibility of the local entity. We cannot utilize CDBG funds for operating and maintenance facilities and expenses. Okra is not in the business of maintenance or repair. We're in the business of rehabilitation. And you will hear this from community liaisons and grant services people on a regular basis. We cannot utilize CDBG funds for lobbying activities. We have to be very, very careful that we are nonpartisan in all the activities that we are doing. And so that is one of the reasons we do not do lobbying. And then we want to make sure you understand that any CDBG assisted facility cannot be used as collateral during any part of the grant period or the subrecipient reporting period. In other words, you cannot you build a building with CDBG funds, you cannot utilize that as collateral for a loan for an expansion or something of that nature with that particular facility. The next slide, please. We want you to understand very, very early in this process that just because a project meets a national objective and just because the project is an eligible activity does not necessarily mean that it is fundable. Couple things here. First of all, every year Okra determines whether or not what types of needs are necessary, and that goes into a consolidated plan. The other thing to know is their CDBG funds are a limited resource, and so when we open up a program, it becomes imperative that the community understands it is competitive and that there is no guarantee of funding. Just because you meet the eligibility and you meet the national objective, there are other communities that tell their story better. And those were the ones that will probably be funded. That does not preclude you from the opportunity to resubmit an application, provided we're going to be providing that same activity in the next round. But just understand it is a very competitive process. So that being said, we're going to move on to the next activity, and I'll let Belanway take it from here.
Okay. And thank you, Jerry. For this next activity, instead of doing breakout groups, we're just gonna go ahead and do this next activity here. So let me go ahead and drop the activity link in the chat. So just take a few minutes on this activity and then we'll go over the answers for it. Again, this is an individual. We're not going to do breakout groups for this session, just to make things move along a little bit quicker. And then, yeah, take a few minutes. And again, I dropped that link in the chat. So if you would like to participate, please utilize that link. Yes, this breakout activity, just for timing, you can go ahead and work on it yourself, and then we will come back to it. Okay, and I'm noticing a few more responses, so you just, I'll give you a few more minutes, and then we'll go ahead and get through the second activity. And thank you, you all, for being so patient. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so we can go over this activity. So if you are ready to follow along, I will go ahead and get started. So this activity, we were trying to see if you could be able to find out if a community is an entitlement or a non-entitlement. If there's a national objective, what national objective primarily qualifies this community? And then based on the information provided, would this project be eligible for CDBG funds? If yes, please explain if it's eligible. If not, explain what made it eligible. These are essay questions, so I will go over these fairly succinctly. So the first one is the town of Atlanta. The town of Atlanta has an LMI of 64% and has designated a building to be a slum and blight on a spot basis. The town will utilize the grant funding to tear down the building and repurpose the lot into a green space. So the first answer to this question is town of Atlanta is actually a non-entitlement. And then this type of project would qualify for CDBG funding. It is eligible. So under slum blight. So then the next question is, the city of Montpelier has an LMI of 53% and would like to build new offices in a governmental building. The government building primarily serves low to moderate income individuals and be used as a community space to provide social services. So in this case, city of Montpelier is actually a non-entitlement. The LMI is considered eligible. However, the actual activity, that is an ineligible activity to build new offices in a governmental building. So that is not eligible for OKRA funding, for CDBG funding. The next question is, the city of Greenwood has an LMI of 54% and wants to build a new fire station. The city of Greenwood is actually an entitlement. So this would not be eligible for OKRA funding. However, the activity would be eligible. But the entire project itself would not be fundable because City of Greenwood is an entitlement. Then we have the town of Gosport. It has an LMI of 47%, but after conducting an income survey, the LMI was 54%. So the town of Gosport is a non-entitlement. They are eligible because they were able to do an income survey, and the town wants to complete a drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater master utility in order to prioritize issues. So yeah, that is an eligible activity under CDBG. And then the last question is, the city of Hobart has an LMI of 54% and would like to purchase some equipment for a fire station in a low to moderate income. City of Hobart, again, that is a non-entitlement. The LMI is 54%, so this would be eligible. So if you have any questions regarding any of these, just feel free to drop those in the chat, but we will go ahead and move forward with the next video.
other grant administrators should know, and I've been doing this 15 years. The biggest thing is never, always double check how things should be done. I don't like to rely on my memory, no matter how long you've been doing it or how well you know the program, there's always those little quirks and weird things that happen in projects. Don't just assume how something should be done. Always go back to the handbook. I've got it behind me. I pull it out on a regular basis just to double check, especially if there's something that I don't do all the time. Not every project that I work on requires acquisition. So I may only do that once a year or once every 2 years. So even though I know the process, I always want to double check to make sure that we're doing that I'm doing it right. And also, don't, if something weird comes up in your project, don't assume that you know exactly how to do it. Always check with Okra and grant services. That's what they're there for. And it's much better to fix it on the front end and figure out how to do it right on the front end. Much better than going back after the fact, going back to the community and saying, oh, sorry, I told you the wrong way to do this. Now we have to go back and fix it. You never want that to happen. So always double check how to do something and look at the handbook, ask somebody else if you don't exactly know the answer.
What do I wish other grant administrators would know? Well, I think I want them to know that this is a great career. You really do, I really feel like I'm more than just a grant writer administrator. I feel like I am a part of helping that community plan for a better future and making it a better place for their citizens to live. So in turn, I feel like my work is important. And I think anyone that's going into this field after they've done this for a few years, they'll see that too. And that's why I continue to do this. I've made lifelong friends in each of my communities. Some of my clerk treasurers have attended parties, not bridal showers, but parties that I've had for my kids, graduation parties, whatnot. It's just, you meet so many people and it's a great network. I mean, you're getting exposed to not just engineering and grant writing and administration, but legal and financial and health issues and environmental issues. So it's a lifelong learning career. It's never the same thing twice. It's always a different challenge, a different project, and a different community and different people. So it keeps it exciting, it keeps it fresh, it keeps it new. And ultimately, you do feel like you're giving back and making a difference.
Okay, and thank you for watching that video. Hopefully that was able to bring a little bit more insight of like the career of a grant administrator. We're going to do one more knowledge check. For those of you who are participated in the previous activity, I will mention that there is no score for that activity. It was meant to be a breakout session, and so just the nature of Google Forms, it does not give answers to essay questions. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and drop the next knowledge check in the chat So I've dropped the next knowledge check in the chat. And again, just spend the next couple minutes on it, and then we'll go ahead and discuss those answers. Keep answering those. Keep up with the questions. They're great. We have good chat moderators that are answering those for you all. So. So it looks like about 46 of you have answered. So just take a minute or two to wrap up. Okay, and I have about 55 responses, so I'm going to go ahead and get started and share my screen. Okay, so the first question was fundability equals eligibility plus national objective. Is it true or false? So the majority of you answered that correctly. The answer is actually true. Jerry had discussed this in detail in the previous slides, but in order for a project to be fundable, not only do the projects have to be eligible, the community has to meet a national objective in order for a project to be funded. So then the next question is, Porter County wants to build a wastewater treatment plant. Is it an eligible activity? The correct answer would be yes. So we're really just looking at the activity portion of this. Wastewater treatment plants, that is considered an eligible activity. That is actually one of the primary, one of the most commonly used programs at CDBG is a wastewater drinking water program, and we'll get more into that in the next slides ahead about what exactly programs that we have. So then the third question is, the city of Montpelier would like to update the town hall for lobbying activities. Is this an eligible activity? Great. So all of you answered no. So lobbying activities are an eligible activity. So good on you for answering that. There's no way for a CDBG grant where in lobby activities would be considered an eligible activity. The town of Osgood wants to demolish a blighted building that is hazardous. Is this an eligible activity? So you all answered yes. So the town of Osgood wants to demolish a this would be considered an eligible activity. So this was mostly just making sure that you are aware of the different types of eligible activities and ineligible activities. And then for the last question, I'm sorry, excuse me. The city of Beech Grove would like to rehabilitate a historic library. Is this an eligible activity? The answer is yes. I do have a question. There is confused about question 1. Just because a project is eligible and meets the national objective does not make it. Yeah, that is actually true. So I wanted to also mention that projects need to be somewhat competitive. Especially with different programs, as we'll get into this in more slides, in the slides ahead, but different programs such as wastewater, drink water program have limited funding. And so sometimes those rounds do end up becoming competitive, but you'll learn more about that in the slides ahead. And again, thank you so much for asking those questions. Keep them coming. Any questions so far? Want to go ahead and I'm seeing nothing, so going to go ahead and move forward. So module 3 is project development, processes, community liaisons, and who's involved and how it all works together. So the first question is, what is project development? Project development is the progressive, ongoing process of actively communicating with stakeholders and managing and maintaining federal, state, and legal requirements on a grant. So, project development is truly integral to the process as a grant administrator. This is how you start a project. You will need to communicate with community liaisons, and you'll learn about that more in that slide later. In the next slides later, it's about aligning resources and ideas so a CDBG project can reach its goals. It ensures the community has everything it needs to execute the project successfully, and that involves deliberately planning in order to make sure that the project that you have as a grant administrator is successful. So what does a project development process look like? This is a high-level overview. What we're looking at is community engagement, gather input from residents to identify needs and project ideas. Okay, so we'll learn more about what that community engagement looks like in the slides, in the later slides, but that is really key because if there are issues going on within a community, then you need to be able to articulate that correctly by engaging with your community for a project. For strategic planning, that also goes with finding resources that align with project goals and objectives. So we want to make sure that we are looking at different sources of funding for CDBG projects. Not only CDBG, one of the questions you'll see on a CDBG application is sustainability, and really trying to look for other sources of funding, not only for your different projects. Then third is evaluate details. We want to make sure that we are engaging the community liaison early and continually as the project is developed. So that goes with what I've mentioned previously in the previous slide. We want to make sure that we are actively communicating with the community liaison and Okra as a whole throughout the entire project. And now we'll pass this back to Christmas.
Thank you, Belinda. So I had the privilege of talking a little bit about why community engagement is important. Ideally, any type of strategic planning involves a robust public engagement process. For CDBG, this begins at the project development phase. When you engage your community with surveys and other types of tools, the results will often surprise you. I mean, some communities will use a simple SWOT analysis asking for like strengths and weaknesses, opportunities or threats. Sometimes we see them utilize open-ended online surveys to kind of capture key community issues. Others will generate lists of known issues and ask residents to rank them according to perceived importance. But the most comprehensive approaches to project development engage stakeholders in person at facilitated visioning workshops, town hall meetings. These approaches, when developing a strategic plan or when developing a project and narrowing down those details, can take a little extra effort and time, but it certainly helps local leaders to understand what is important to the community. And that will be important as you are building the application for your project later on. But there is a need for local participation in the organization of residents to meet the challenges facing communities, and that's especially important with CDBG. And there is a role for you to play as a grant administrator in helping to organize that input in those community engagement efforts. For any CDBG funded project, it's important to ensure that residents play an instrumental in identifying needs and new development options in areas that have been historically presented with few such options. CDBG is all about empowering residents, individuals, and groups of people within the community to be part of the process and to affect change within their communities utilizing some of these funding resources. Now, understand that when I'm talking about community engagement in this context, I'm not talking about the required citizen participation aspects of the grant. We'll get into that a little bit more during the administration of the grant, which we'll talk about a bit later, but all entities that receive CDBG grants have to develop plans that include citizen participation. That has to do with reasonable public access to meetings, permitting an opportunity for review of proposals and applications and things of that nature, establishment of a grievance and complaint process. But all of that is something very different from the community input that we would encourage you as a grant administrator and as a community to solicit upfront as part of your project development process. Can you go to the next slide, please, Belanley? So we've already talked a little bit about some of the stakeholders are. I mean, they're you. There is a reason why you're here learning alongside us today. Perhaps you are the chief elected official of a small community. Maybe you're the mayor, maybe you're the town council president, or another decision maker within the community who is responsible for working alongside local economic development leaders, nonprofits, civic organizations, business owners, residents, utility operators. Essentially anyone who has a stake in a CDBG funded project is your stakeholder. Anyone who is in a position within the community to speak to the needs that you've identified as part of your community engagement and input process, anyone who has unique knowledge that can inform the way that a project's details come together. Those are your stakeholders, and those are the people that you as a grant administrator want to ensure have a place at the table when those project development discussions are occurring. And that doesn't happen by accident. It is very intentional and deliberate. You have to create those opportunities, but you also have to engage in strategic outreach to ensure that those people know when and where they have that opportunity. Next slide, please. Some of those opportunities could be by way of public hearings, which are a requirement for CDBG funded grants. We'll unpack some of the details related to that later, but I've already mentioned surveys. We've seen some communities build surveys using survey tools like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms that they have disseminated on their website, their community website, or on Facebook, so that people can respond and provide input on needs and how those needs are impacting their quality of life as the community is looking to set with those needs. Social media posts, letters from residents and businesses Those are often a key upload within the application that is submitted for a CDBG project. We would often expect to see letters of support or letters describing need from residents and other community stakeholders, speaking to what is going to be addressed by the project being proposed, regional partnerships, petitions, customer service surveys from local businesses. Engage your local business community, engage your Main Street organization. If you're going to be working on a downtown revitalization project, they should be part of that conversation because they help drive residents to that area, and they provide probably a lot of different professional and retail services to those folks who might otherwise have to travel a good amount of distance to get to the next closest grocery store in the next community. So next slide, please. Why is it important? This isn't about chasing grant dollars, right? The most effective and competitive CDBG projects aren't the ones where we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, where, you know, the opportunity precedes the need within the community, precedes the funding opportunity. And that's where we really begin to see kind of that alignment of need and the resources available within communities within the context of a project development process. Once the community has a plan, once that need has been identified, then the community can set out clear objectives for potential projects while developing specific action items on how to move those projects forward. From a strategic planning perspective, you need to look at what tangible assets you have versus what you need to achieve your strategic plan. And if there is a resource available that aligns with that need, then you can begin to talk through as a grant administrator with your stakeholders what you have to work with, how to assign human and financial resources to ensure that that project avoids any snares that could cripple its progress. And that aligns with the priorities set by the community in terms of how they're going to best stretch and leverage every dollar they have available to achieve their intended outcome. And in that way, the entire community is able to contribute to the successful achievement of its overall vision. Next slide, please. Okay, so from a grants administration perspective, what does strategic planning look like? As a GA, when we are engaged in project development discussions, you are the one helping to convene those key stakeholders. You are likely going to be the one who is working alongside the community to gather and to review the community input received, to review any existing plans that the community has, to ensure that the project you are developing aligns with the goals and the intended outcomes, the strategies proposed within any existing plans. You're going to help to identify program, you're going to prioritize activities, identify other resources available. CDBG may be a piece of the puzzle, but it may not be the only piece of the funding puzzle for this particular project. So there will be conversations with communities and with your community liaison around how you can leverage CDBG dollars with other resources available for eligible project types under CDBG. And the best person to connect with for that conversation is your Okra community liaison. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that intersection looks like in our next slide, a few slides. Okay, we've already kind of covered this. Every project needs resources. Project development includes the identification and steering of any capital funding available. As a grant administrator, you're going to help the community research funding possibilities at the alongside your community liaison. Next slide. Okay. One thing that I would encourage you as a grant administrator, make sure you are reviewing the eligibility criteria for any funding sources identified. We're focused today on what the CDBG eligibility criteria are, but if you are going to match or leverage any additional funding sources with CDBG, then you need to make sure that you have those eligibility criteria in mind as well. And the best way to navigate the nuances related to any of those eligibility requirements is to talk through with your community liaison what that looks like. But one thing that I do want to also mention is that for CDBG, one of the main things that you need to consider as you're aligning resources and you are identifying potential projects that could be a good fit for CDBG funding is that CDBG dollars are considered the funds of last resort. So in other words, they should not be your first stop within that conversation. You should evaluate all funding alternatives that exist for that project type first. And if CDBG dollars end up, if you can answer the question, right, but for these dollars, we wouldn't move this project forward, then CDBG is potentially a good fit, and that's where you would reach your CL and begin to discuss that in earnest as it relates to the project details and how you project in such a way that it aligns with that expectation. So there is a match requirement for CDBG, and we're going to dig into that in a little bit. Next slide. Okay, evaluating the details. So who are you going to call to evaluate those details alongside you? Once you have identified a potential project based on the needs brought to you through your community engagement process, you've strategically prioritized resources and identified potential funding options, including CDBG for a project. What's the next step? Jerry, I am going to hand it off to you so you can talk a little bit more about the CL role and how you as a team are positioned to help communities with that evaluation.
Thank you, Christmas. I appreciate that. So community liaisons there are 6 of us that are scattered throughout the state. We're strategically located within the state. In fact, we are required to be embedded within the region that we serve. And our primary goal is to help communities accomplish their goals as they move forward. We are a part of Okra, and as a part of Okra, we serve under at the pleasure of the Lieutenant Governor, and we're representing the state of Indiana through this process. We like to consider ourselves as the front door to state government. We try to be a two-way conduit between communities and state agencies, and what that essentially means is we may not be able to provide solutions specifically from Okra, but part of our responsibility is to search out and research different agencies, organizations within the state that might be able to help the local communities accomplish their goals. Next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit of a, put a name with the face, you see on the slide the current community affairs staff. We are led under the able leadership of our manager, Neil Elkins. He is out of Southwest Indiana. Then in the Northeast part of the state, we have Allie Doherty. She is been with us for a couple of years now. And then we've had a little bit of turnover in some other areas of the state. Jill Hahn is a new representative for Southwest. Our new community liaison for West Central is Sarah Froderman. And then in the southeast portion of the state, we have Kathy Dayoff Dwyer. And then in the Northwest, you are being served by myself. You will notice that East Central is currently vacant. It is our hope and intention to have that position filled very, very soon. I just want you to understand that it does take a little bit of time for a community liaison to get up to speed. As you go through this training, as you go through the other subsequent courses that we have, you will see that there is a lot of information that our community liaisons have to understand just with CDBG, but we have other programs that we are responsible for as well. And your community liaison will be able to help you out with those different programs. But it does take them a little bit of time to be able to accomplish the knowledge base that they need to not only be effective, but to be able to provide the customer service that we want to provide to the local communities. So with that being said, Allie and I will be mentoring our new community liaisons. Hopefully you will have comfort in that fact plus our grant services staff does a significant job in assisting us as well. And of course, the CDBG team helps us with all things associated with community development block grants. Next slide, please. Just so you have an idea of what areas are represented in each of the regions. This is our community liaison map. We do have this posted prominently on our website. Here's a link right on the splash screen, the initial screen. We encourage you to have a copy of this, especially if you are working different regions. I know that some of our regional planning organizations, we affectionately call them RPOs, work within a couple of different community liaisons. And so sometimes it can be confusing. We also want you to understand that if you have difficulty getting access to a community liaison in one region or in your region because they're on the road or in different appointments, that you might be able to contact a different community liaison and they should be able to help you as well. Or Neil Elkins is a great gatekeeper for providing information and then who's available to be able to answer your questions. Next question, or excuse me, next slide. So why is the community liaison important to be engaging with? First of all, the community liaison needs to have to be involved initially with the conversation of a project. Project development can occur very, very quickly, or it can take many years to be able to get a project from initial germ of an idea to the actual turnkey where the project is completed and given over to the community. So it's always a good idea to involve the community liaison as soon as possible and before application effort is initiated. We can comfortably say that applications that are rushed through typically do not do well with the application process. The longer, the more comfortable that the community liaison is with the project, the better the technical assistance that they might be able to provide to you. The other thing is the community liaisons are not just CDBG experts or officiants. There are other resources that they are working with within state and federal government to be able to help fund different types of projects. This would be things like USDA, EDA, SRF. Of course, we're alphabet soup in state governments. So when I give you an acronym, they all mean something, and we'll provide more information of that in subsequent training. The other thing that the community liaisons do is they're listening ears. They're trying to, they're involved in the meetings with local units of government, as well as state and federal agencies, as well as other entities. And they are exchanging information with these organizations, these local government marketing groups, economic development organizations. And as a part of that process, they're gathering up additional information about how other communities are doing projects, how they're funding them, how they're being accomplished. And that information can be extremely helpful to local communities as they move forward. Finally, community liaisons are charged with providing technical assistance on all the Okra programs. We're not just CDBG. We have the Historic Renovation Grant Program. We have Indiana Main Street. We are Next Level Communications and Broadband Deployment. There's just a small sampling of the other programs that we operate within Okra. We are constantly evaluating the programs and seeing how we might be able to tweak them to make them better, or do we need to create a new program that will be able to help solve the issues that local communities are being presented with. So that being said, let's go ahead and turn our attention now to the idea of application management. And I'm trying to remember who's going to be doing this. I think it was you, Christmas. Is that right?
Jerry, we're working on this piece together.
Oh, that's who it is. Okay.
The CLs also play a role. Yeah, we just, and we're going to unpack the details of the application process in a future webinar, but just to kind of give you a high level overview of what it looks like and how the CL can help you throughout the process. Here are just some key milestones for you to pay attention to, key aspects of that application process, right? So for planning applications, it's a one-stage process. For construction applications, it's a two-stage process. Regardless of whether you're coming in for a planning activity or for a construction activity, your CL is there to advise you on the requirements of the application and the program itself. They can provide feedback and technical assistance along the way, whether you are looking for feedback on your narratives, right? Your narratives are the main piece of the application. They give the scoring committee context to understand the needs identified and some of the details provided in the supportive documentation that you upload to our electronic grants management system. But the CLs are there to advise on exactly what it is that the scoring committee is going to be looking for and how you as a community, how you as a grant administrator can best answer those questions in terms of the information that you're providing within that application process. Grant Services plays a role in that application management by doing a regulatory check, both at the proposal and at the application stage, to ensure that all of the federal requirements of the grant, that the project itself has met all of the federal requirements of the grant. And that is, of course, to ensure compliance if the project is awarded. And then, of course, scoring. The CLs serve to provide information and insight on the scoring process. They serve scoring committee alongside representatives from our program management and grant services teams who will be evaluating not just the project details, right, but the community's capacity to execute that project in a successful way to ensure compliance with the funding requirements. We look at things like the project design. So we're looking at, you know, what you're going to be doing and how you're going to be doing it. We're going to look at your budget. We're going to look at the need for the project, and we're going to want to hear specifically from residents on how those needs are impacting their quality of life and how this project proposes to address those needs, and then ultimately the impact of the funds. How is this CDBG funding going to help buy down or minimize that financial impact of the project on the community and on those low to moderate income residents specifically? But your CL will be there to help you all along the way. So look forward to a little more insight and detail into the nuts and bolts of those processes as we move along, but this kind of gives you that 10,000 foot overview. Did I miss anything, Jerry?
Yeah, I was going to say one of the things to remember also is because the grants management system, as you learn to use it, as you experience it in your initial times with it, a lot of times your community liaison will be of assistance. And we also have locked out some of the aspects to a community liaison to be able to enter the data for the grant administrators. So it's important to have a relationship with your community liaison so that they can assist you with those different types of aspects that would fall under the administration of the application, as well as in the technical assistance as you develop the application. There is a subjective portion to every application, and you can have your community liaison review that to see if you are hitting the essential points that we're asking for in that narrative, so that you can maximize your score. But there's lots of different ways your community liaison can help you in the project development as well as the application management process.
Can you move us ahead to the next slide, please, Belonlight? I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but one of the things that we will assess alongside you as part of that application process is the community's readiness to apply. Whether the community is eligible to receive CDBG funding, whether there are other requirements that are essential they meet before they apply. The SAMS registration would be a great example of this. CDBG requires that the community have an active SAMS registration in order to apply. So that's one of those nuanced pieces that you as a grant administrator would work alongside us to ensure was ready ahead of any application effort so that you could come in and come in competitively without running into any potential roadblocks. This means reading, your best bet is always to read the instructions and any announcements that OCRA sends out. We announce and provide round specific information for every open grant round. And so you always want to be paying attention and looking out for anything specific to this particular round, along with any updates that we send along the way. We are committed to a continuous improvement process. And so if we identify that there's something that needs to be changed or that needs to be updated in order to ensure that the process is as seamless and transparent as possible, sometimes we will exercise the ability to implement those process changes as soon as we can to make it easier for everybody. And we will do our best to always communicate any changes to you in the form of statewide announcements. And so if you haven't signed up yet on our website to be part of our listserv to ensure that you get those announcements in real time, we really want to encourage you as a potential grant administrator or just as a key stakeholder within the community to do that. But do pay special attention. Your best bet for any project is to pay special attention to the round specific instructions, to communicate with your community liaison, and to be on the lookout for any announcements throughout the process so that you're staying as current and as up to date on the information that you need to ensure your readiness to apply. So next, I believe Bolanle is going to take us through the role, talk a little bit more about the role certified grant administrator, and then we're going to get into more of the details related to the application process and the administration process as well.
Thanks, Christmas. Okay, so we are going to be discussing what it means to be an OCRA certified grant administrator. Again, as Christmas mentioned, this is one of my this is the project that I work on the most is working with GAs. I work with GAs on training, the GA updates, continuing ed credits. So I'm pretty familiar with what it takes and what I see in day-to-day in my interaction with grant administrators as far as the requirements and the duties of one. So the requirements. All potential grantees who wish to apply for a CDBG grant from OCRA must use a grant administrator certified by OCRA. Grant administrators must be procured in accordance with federal and state guidelines if their professional service fees are to be paid from grant funds. And if local funds will be used to pay for grant administrative services, the grantee should use local procurement policies. So again, these are the requirements that we require for grant administrators. This is what you need. So they have to be procured if a community would like to use a grant administrator, and then local funds need to be used to pay for grant administrative services. So now the duties. The duties originated from, and as you grow as a grant administrator, you'll learn more about how our code of conduct works. But for the duties, we want all grant administrators to follow all federal, state, and local laws, regulations, and guidance while administrating the grant. We have a wealth of knowledge here at OCRA and also at Grant Services. So in order to stay compliant with these federal, state, and local laws, regulations, we will assist you with following that. As far as advising communities openly and honestly. Now, this is very important. So as a grant administrator, you're going to have to strategically assess for a community and help them identify opportunities for grant funding. So you want to make sure that you are acting in the best interest within that community. So if they do not need a project for a particular project, then it's about speaking openly and honestly about what are the pros and cons of facilitating a project or creating a project. You also want to make sure that you're avoiding any conflicts of interest and disclosing any conflicts of interest when they exist. You want to make sure that you're interacting with a professional manner with community members, Okra staff, and other stakeholders at all times. So we're all a team here together, communities, Okra, grant services. And so we, as a grant administrator, please act as professional as possible as you're communicating with us. So you also want to make sure that you're holding the interests of the community above their own interests. So again, as a grant administrator, you want to make sure that you are strategically assessing projects to make sure that a community actually needs a project. And then we also, as a stakeholder with Okra and grant services and communities, we want you to also foster new and innovative ideas by sharing best practices and other resources. So the message that we're for here today is that Okra grant administrators help Okra's vision. So in a community, a grant administrator can take several different roles depending on their background. So, you know, in addition to those duties that I had mentioned previously in the previous slide, grant administrators can act as project managers, grant writers. It really all just depends on your own individual capabilities and what you will bring to a community. And then just remember the vision statement of Okra is the Indiana Office of Community and Rural Affairs works with communities to build relevant and economically thriving places where people want to live, work, and grow. And so as an Okra grant administrator, that means that you are part of this mission and will serve communities alongside us, helping them grow and prosper for years to come. So we are a team. And again, I just want to reiterate that we as a team will work together with you. You're not alone. If you have any questions throughout being a grant administrator, please reach out to any one of us and we'd be more than happy to help you. So what's next? If you're interested in becoming a certified grant administrator, you're going to take the exam at the end of this course. So we will be releasing more details on what that exam looks like in the upcoming days ahead. This is just part 1 of CDBG 101, so we will not release the exam to you. For 201, we're going to talk about just a high level knowledge of income surveys and what they are. What this class is not going to actually teach you how to conduct an income survey. However, it's going to expand your knowledge on what an income survey is used for and what it is. And then also project development. We touched on that in the beginning. Again, it is one of the most integral parts of a project. And so we are really going to emphasize in that class what is project development and what does it mean to be what does good project development look like for CDBG. And then the 301 is planning and construction grant application and administration. So this is getting more into the details of how to apply that knowledge that foundational knowledge that we are learning in 101 and how to apply that to the different programs. And then 401 is case study, and that is a 2-month case study. This is where we'll actually sink our teeth into an actual a project. Of course, it's not going to be a full project because those take a little bit more, those take a lot more time, but this project will ensure that you are ready to be a certified grant administrator, and it will ask you the key details of what you need to be a grant administrator. So as far as schedule goes, this is 101. As long as you complete the next training on April 7th and pass the exam with a minimum of 75%, you are good to go with 101. You do not need to take the second 101 in June. All the dates for this training are tentative. So we will be readjusting these dates just depending on case by case basis, interest, and just making sure that we serve the needs of everyone who is interested in participating in this training. And then this is the certificate for this is their certificate for the training. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. So we're gonna go ahead and take a 5-minute break and come back and then wrap up. Let's give it till it's 11:38, so come back about 11:45. And it looks like it's 11:45 on the dot. Looks like everyone is back here. So we're going to go ahead and start with our last knowledge check of the day. Go ahead. So, okay, at this point, we all know how knowledge checks works. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this knowledge check in the chat for you all to complete. I'll give you about a few minutes, and then we'll go over the answers. Yes, and the link to the knowledge check is in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and drop it just one more time. And if you have any questions, feel free to also drop those in the chat as well.
Okay, and it looks like we have about 46. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh my page and see, just give you another minute or so to wrap up. Okay, so everyone should be able to see my screen, and we'll go ahead and start the review. Um, so what is an entitlement community? So if you answered a community with more than 50,000 residents, you are correct. Now, that is generally the answer. We do have the list of entitlement communities provided in the PowerPoint slides if you are interested. There are obviously some nuances when it comes to this, but for the most part, a community with more than 50,000 residents would be an entitlement community. So the second question is, what is the primary way of determining LMI? So it looks like the majority of you were able to answer that. It is the HUD census data. It would not be an income survey. And the reason being why it would not be an income survey is unless there is a justification as to why the HUD census data is ineligible, such as it could be anything from multiple businesses closing in that area or just some economic downturn, COVID, really any of those type of reasons would be the reasoning for an income survey. So it would just be any change to that area. So always go with HUD census data first. For a project to qualify for CDBG assistance, it must meet what two main criteria? So it looks like the majority of you have answered that correctly. So it's the two criteria are to have an eligible activity and to meet a national objective. We talked about fundability in the previous slides about what it takes to be a fundable project with CDBG. And also just the nature of how sometimes it is your project does have to be somewhat competitive for some of these programs due to limited funding. So the next couple of questions are based off of just different scenarios. So we're going to talk about those. Some of these activities we don't currently fund, but so the town of Hagerstown, so that one was pretty easy. That one is, so it would be a non-entitlement. The LMI of 51%. So what does that mean? What does that mean? So most likely that would make it eligible. So that would be correct. And then activities, it is considered an eligible activity. So that would, most of you have gotten the correct answers for that project. And then for the question above, please select the most likely national objective. So the correct one would be most likely area benefit. Well, and
I would say that answer could actually be either one.
It could be either one. Yeah.
It could be LMI limited clientele, or it could be area basis. That would be one of those questions that you would probably kind of talk through on, because there are nuance impacts related to either choice. This particular community has an area, the easiest way for the community to meet the national objective. But for this particular activity, they could alternatively consider coming in under LMI limited clientele. Now that would require income verification from all of the families, all of the residents who would be utilizing the service, and they would have to demonstrate for 5 years after the project was funded that 51% of the folks that they were serving, at least 51% of the folks that they were serving, met that LMI standard. There is the possibility, if this is an existing not-for-profit organization that has been providing this service to the community for many years, and they can show 3 months worth of data that would indicate a higher LMI percentage is actually served by this particular facility, then there is the possibility that they may be able to come in under LMI limited clientele at a higher LMI percentage. There are risks associated with that decision. So again, this is where I cannot emphasize enough the value of touching base with your community liaison, talking through the pros and cons of both and what is really going to be the best fit for this project, for this community, not just in terms of fundability, but of competitiveness and compliance. I mean, those are all things that we want to take into consideration as we are developing a project and assessing which national objective and eligible activity align, how they align, and what's going to work best from a compliance standpoint, if that all makes sense.
Yes. Thank you, Christmas. So the next question is, the city of Martinsville has a LMI of 34%, and would like to rehabilitate and add on to a structure for use of a men's transitional housing facility. We didn't mention the national objective for housing. We don't typically fund housing at this point in time. And these questions were developed based around that. So let's just talk about the two things that would you know, which are the city of Martinsville. Okay, so whoever answered that as a non-entitlement, you are correct. And then as far as an LMI of 34%, that would deem it ineligible if they were using the LMI for that. But because we're not going to be touching on housing, I'm going to go ahead and skip this question.
Valama, your audio is cutting in and out pretty badly.
Oh, apologies. Okay. Okay, I guess I'll go back up. So, this question, we did touch on housing just a bit. We do, at this point in time, that is not a national objective that we are using, and so we did not provide any information on that on the slides or anything like that. What I do want to mention is that the city of Martinsville is a non-entitlement, and also based on the LMI, just to look at the LMI itself, not the project eligibility, that would make it ineligible for a project. For housing, if we were to use that national objective, kind of some of those nuances, if we did fund housing, the national objective would be housing. But again, apologies there. This is a
if
question.
I can allow this is another further to illustrate how further complicated CDBG can be. If it is transitional housing, it would not be considered under what HUD would consider the LMI housing because it's not permanent housing. So then it could potentially fall under a public facility. So it would be eligible under a public facility for an eligible activity if it meets a national objective. However, it's not an eligible activity or type of activity that we currently are offering. So it would be something that we would have to have a long discussion with your CL. So the theme of this really is get in contact with us early and often if the project doesn't align very clearly with the national objective and a eligible activity.
Yeah, this is another example of a project that is potentially fundable, but it is not in alignment with the priorities that are we currently have set within Okra. And so it would maybe dinged there. And then we would have the issue and question of how competitive this potential project would be in comparison to the other public facility projects.
Thank you. This concludes part 1 of the CDBG 101 training. I'm going to go ahead and we have an end of the day survey for you all to complete. If you have any questions before we close, please feel free to drop those in the chat. We'll be here to add more to add on to some of the training or any of the questions that you have. We will have CDBG the part 2 tomorrow. Thursday. Thursday, April 7th from 9 to 12. So you should have the links for not only the web meeting for that, but also you have the link to the GA training link that has the PowerPoint. Any additional information, we will make sure that we email you all. Again, the survey link is in the chat. So feel free to answer that. That'll help us for part 2. And also, if you have any questions, please ask those now or table them for the next part.
Well, I'm not seeing anything immediately pop up in the chat, so I just wanted to express my thanks. We are excited to have hosted you here today, and we hope that you have found the training on some of these fundamental elements related to CDBG very helpful. We're going to begin to unpack some of those context and concepts in more detail in the next webinar, but looking forward to seeing you there as well. And if you need anything from us in the meantime, please just reach out and let us know.